Alrighty then, when diversity goes wrong, and if you notice, instead of a stairwell into a plane, it's a stairway to heaven. When you get into things like this is when you start getting societal collapse. This is when you start getting into problems. And it's when diversity goes wrong. I'm just going to jump right into the story. From Breitbart, no consideration of performance. Air Force told to hire women and minorities over white men. Period. End of statement. Now, if you were to say, hey, out of all these applicants, here are the top X amount of applicants, and we'd like you to try to, just try to make sure that everything is diverse, and we want to make sure that it doesn't seem like we're making preferential treatment of one group over another group. We want things to be equal. There's an argument for that if you're pulling from the top 10% or 20% of people. But what happens if that career field doesn't have a lot of women, doesn't have a lot of minorities? It's just not a career field that people are interested in of those groups. I'll give you a good example. Oil, like an oil derrick, or some of these guys that are working on wells digging these oil rigs. Don't see a lot of women fighting for that. But what happens if they say, hey, 50% of everybody you have to hire is going to be a woman for this job, and no women applicants are showing up? Do you just not hire anyone? Because that's a problem that they had in, I think it was in Australia, in a coal mine, if I'm remembering. It's a story from a couple years ago. They said X amount of the staff has to be women, and no women are applying, so they were like, okay, well, I guess you just can't open then. Like, you can't mine. What it's doing is it's taking away personal liberties and choices from people. Well, here, when you say no consideration of performance and you're talking about flying an airplane, if you want it's one thing if you say no consideration when it comes to being a waiter or a waitress. Because then if you get bad, lousy service, like, okay, you don't go back there again. If you get lousy service from a pilot, you're dead. So the Air Force is told to hire women and minorities over white men, regardless of consideration. Now, what's weird is, historically, they had a name for this. It's called racism. That's what this is. Just by doing it in the reverse, they feel that it's okay. This doesn't help anybody. This doesn't help anybody. Because then if they're not up to snuff, you have to fire them. And that looks bad for the company. If they're not up to snuff, maybe they kill somebody. That's not good. And if you're a pilot, if you're a woman or a minority or somebody that's worked really hard to become a good pilot, what they're saying to you is, well, we don't care whether you're a good pilot or not. Like, thanks for being good, I guess, but we're just going to hire you on an immutable character that you have nothing to do with. Like, you're not helping anybody. The Royal Air Force, RAF, recruiters have allegedly been ordered to hire ethnic minorities and women over white males in an effort to meet government-backed diversity targets, leaks have reportedly revealed. In an effort to meet race and gender diversity quotas set by the so-called Conservative Party government, recruiters within Britain's Royal Air Force have been ordered to hire women and BAME, which is Black, Asian, and minority ethnic candidates over white men, a report published on Saturday has claimed. Insiders within the Air Force have already claimed that an effective pause on the hiring of white men has been implemented, according to reports, with diversity targets being cited as having a negative impact on the Air Force's operational capabilities. So they're saying because we're lacking women and minorities for this particular role, that's having a negative impact on our capabilities. And, when you have, whether it's European, can you imagine going to, Botswana or someplace deep in Africa and saying, okay, only white people are allowed to have this job? They'd be like, okay, well, there's really not any white people here. So that means what? That we just don't hire anybody for this position? Europe is primarily Caucasian. And yes, there are getting more minorities in. But when you say, hey, we need 30% or 50% of X groups in this job, and you do that for all jobs, there's going to be a point where there's just not enough people to fill those quotas. Now, granted, with the borders open and bringing a bunch of other people in, I guess maybe you can eventually get there. But what you're basically saying is, hey, all you white men or you white people or whatever, Yeah, we're not going to hire you just because you were born with your skin color. Yeah, that's racism. And we all know that's not a good thing. But what's interesting is the inclusive ones are the ones bringing it back. And I'll say this much, and I'll only say this part on locals because once I edit this and put it, I can't say all this stuff on YouTube once I put it over on YouTube. When the truth is, when you say, hey, you know something, we just go by performance. And if you're black and you're the best, you're hired. If you're a woman and you're the best, you're hired. If you're a white man and you're the best, you're hired. And what does that mean? It means you better work hard and you better do well. And yes, in some cases that does mean that other people have to work harder than others. You look at most of the people in politics and government and everything else, their kids go to private school. They get a leg up because mommy or daddy politician can put in a good word and get them somewhere. I mean, for an example, look at Chelsea Clinton. Okay, so yeah, they have an advantage. And they have an advantage over the poor white kid that's somewhere out in Virginia or West Virginia. I forget that there's a county out there that has some of the worst crime and the worst drug use and the worst, like the lowest income per capita is actually, it's like some podunk, like white county in like one of the Virginias or something like that. So it has nothing to do with your skin color. It has to do with money and, are both parents involved in your lives and are like, how is your stability of your family? It has lots of things. And maybe that does affect black people and Latinos more than whites. Then why? Let's figure out that. Instead of giving them a free pass at the end of the finish line and just saying, okay, whites, you can't cross the finish line. We're going to let all these other people cross first, and then you can cross. And saying it's equality. No, if you want real equality, let's make sure the school systems are good. Let's make sure that men are still involved with their children. They say insiders within the Air Force had already claimed that an effective pause on the hiring of white men had been implemented with diversity targets. I think I already read that. Such claims have now been given even further backing, with Sky News report claiming that documents leaked to the broadcaster appear to back up the charges. According to the news organization, one document explicitly stated that the recruitment force continues to prioritize female candidates for what is described as customer relationship management. Remember, guys, this is the military, the Royal Air Force. Another document said that recruiters were prioritizing ethnic minorities, saying the recruitment force continues to prioritize BAME candidates from the VA CRM, while recruitment operations prioritizes its loading BRTC, basic training course with minorities. Meanwhile, an internal email seen by Sky News reportedly showed the organization ditching suitability interviews for proposed candidates, a move that one insider claimed was to decrease the number of women and ethnic minorities candidates filtered out by the process. The pressure and direction from senior leaders, while that female and ethnic minority candidates are to be given priority treatment in the processing of their application, no consideration was to be given for their performance. I'll tell you something that's kind of funny. I'm not going to read through this because, again, you guys kind of get the idea. I'm going to tell you something. It's funny. It's called phrasing. I'm going to phrase this differently for you. Are you ready? You ready? We do not want as many white, toxic men in the military. We are recruiting for the LGHD TV community and for minorities and for women to be the main force of our military. That way, when we go to war and we get in conflict, all the white men are safe because they're not allowed in the military at the same rates. We're going to put the LGHD TV and the women and the minorities on the front lines so they can get shot. See, when you phrase it that way, sounds kind of racist, doesn't it? Sounds like you're valuing white men more than the other groups. And I guarantee you, if there was a conflict and you've got these women getting hurt and these women getting shot on the front lines and you've got these minorities getting shot on the front lines, and the planes are crashing, and they've got minority pilots in there, and what would the news say? Well, look at all these white men are at home working 9-to-5 jobs, and we've sent all our minorities and our women and our LGHTV people off to war. That's not very fair, is it? You can't play the identity politics and have a winner, because there's always going to be, what happens if somebody's half black, half white? What happens if they're a quarter black, but they look white? What if they're only a 10th black, but they look kind of black? What happens when they're black and they're Asian? What about a black Asian Jew, like Lenny Kravitz? You can't split people up like that. And what it does is it has literally nothing to do with the person, of who they are and what they are. So, which is it going to be? Are we going to say that this is a bad thing because we're not considering performance, which means that you're going to put somebody that maybe isn't qualified to fly into battle because you're going to get them killed? And if you ask me, that's a disservice for the minorities and the women and everybody else. Or are we going to say, hey, I'm okay with this? Now, I'm being facetious when I say this. I'm not being serious. But if you were to ask these people, they say, hey, you know something? No consideration of performance. We're going to put everybody forward equally. And if you go to the guy that's the white supreme guy, right? He'd say, wait, you don't want to send white men into combat, and so you're going to fill all the roles with women and minorities and send them off into combat instead? I'm okay with this. You've now got the weirdo lefties, and you've got the people that are the white supremes, people that are fine with minorities being ended in agreement. Sounds pretty to me, doesn't it to you?